All right, guys. Good morning. Good morning. We're going to be starting in with the meeting with the in-house CLA attorney, um, Nalali. So in a few minutes, we're going to be starting. We're going to be talking about the closing disclosure, the CD. That's the most important thing you should know on any closing deal. This is also an opportunity for everybody to ask any questions. I mean, if there's a question that you guys might have, she may be able to answer it. This relates to real estate. So, give it a go. We have a lot of people attending in person, and there are some. I'm going to put a real quick reminder on WhatsApp to if they're going to join online. Can everybody hear me? Right? Yeah. All right. We're going to be starting in just a minute.
Yeah.
There we go. All right, so we're going to be starting right about now. We'll just introduce the CLA in-house attorney, Nali.
Okay, everyone, can you hear me through the Zoom?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, as Scott said, I am Nalini Singh. I am the in-house attorney at CLA Title. And today it's a very important topic. We're going to be going over the closing disclosure. For you guys as agents, I'm sure you get sent these all the time and you're asked to maybe take a look at it, review it. Your clients have questions. So I think it's good to be able to be familiar with it, understand where things are, what they mean. And you may not be able to always explain everything on here, but as long as you have an idea and you can direct them on who should be answering, then you can do that because it's not always your expertise also. Okay, so for those of you here in person, I did print off a sample closing disclosure for you guys to look at. And then those online will just follow along. I did have the sections broken out, so hopefully you guys will be able to follow. Okay. Okay, so what is the purpose of the closing disclosure? Well, I'm sure as you guys know, it's required by the CFPB under the new TRID rules a few years ago. It replaced the HUD statement for most of the mortgage transactions that obviously were financed. We still use HUDs if there's cash deals. And it provides a detailed breakdown of the loan terms, the projected payments, and all the closing costs. These are prepared by the lenders. As a title company, we do coordinate with them and make sure our fees are on there as well. But we are given these closing disclosures and all the numbers on here from the lenders. So they actually are the ones that prepare these. And it must be provided to the borrower at least 3 days before closing per the TRID rules. So I'm sure, as you guys know, that starts the clock ticking, and then when we could schedule closing. Okay, so that's why it's always usually down to the wire for these numbers and the CD to go out. Okay, so I'm going to just start from the top on page 1 of the closing disclosure. You'll see on the top, it has the closing information. So on top here, which is just like the caption, it has all the information, includes the closing date, disbursement date, the settlement agent. It also has our internal file number, the property address, the sales amount, and then it also includes the borrower's contact information, sellers, and the lender. And then all the way to the right, as you can see, it also includes the information about the loan type. Okay, and again, that's all filled out by the lender. Okay, and then the rest of this page is really a loan terms overview, and this is for the buyer. And since this is very obviously private, confidential to the buyer, a lot of times that is why we have the buyers and the sellers sign separately. We don't want the sellers, nor are they privy to know this information about the buyer's loan information. So we like to go over this with the buyers alone. Also, you'll see that briefly we're going to go over the other settlement statement, which is called an ALTA, and sometimes you guys are sent that also. The ALTA is the preferred settlement statement to send out to all your parties because it doesn't include this private loan information there. We don't want to share this loan information to everybody. The insurance companies, other agents, they don't need to, nor should they see this private loan information. And so this is just an overview for the buyer on the first page. It goes over their loan amount, the interest rate, monthly principal and interest amounts, if there's any prepayment penalty or balloon payment. Okay, so it's just a snapshot of their loan for them to review at closing. It also does the projected payments again for the first year, principal and interest, if there's any mortgage insurance or escrow being held back. So that's all also included in the projected payments for year one. And then it further breaks down what that escrow amount includes, whether it's property taxes, homeowners insurance, or anything else. So that is what the projected payments section of the first page will tell them. Okay, and then lastly, the closing costs, it lets them know all of their closing costs, and then the cash to close, that bottom number, that is the number that they are told to wire in for closing. Okay. Oh, I went ahead of myself. Okay, now we're going on to page 2 of the closing disclosure. We're going to go over sections A through C, which is the top part of page 2 of the closing disclosure. Okay, so that first part, so A through C are all the loan costs associated with the loan. Section A are origination charges. Again, these are all dealing with charges from the lender. So I always, if they have questions about these, I always direct them to their mortgage broker or their loan officer, because it's not something as a title company that we can change or have control over, and nor can you as agents. So it's best for them. Sometimes even at closing, if they have questions, I have the loan officer on the phone so they can explain it. Ideally, they would explain this to them before closing, and they should, so they're not walking into like brand new information. But if something is new or they're surprised, it would be best to get their loan officer on the phone because they're the ones who control that information. Okay. So section A are charges such as their fees for processing the loan, their underwriting fees, and then their origination charges. Okay. Those are all from the broker or from the loan officer. And then section B are services that the borrower did not shop for. Okay, so these include fees such as their appraisal, credit reports, flood certifications, or any other lender required services. A lot of times the appraisal fee, they pay it before closing. So you'll see it's on the before closing column of the CD so that it's not included in their cash to close for closing. So anything paid out of closing goes in the before closing column. And then section C are services the borrower did shop for, and these are the title fees, okay? Because most times they have a choice of who they choose for title. So fees that are included in section C are our title searches, any closing fees or settlement agent fee. All of our title insurance premiums are here. Endorsements for the title policy, all of those fees are included in section C. Okay. And while this particular closing disclosure is not really released to the seller, there is a column on here that includes the seller's fees as well, because the lender needs to see both sides. Okay. Moving on to the sections E through H, which they label as other costs. Okay, so this is just everything else that is related to the closing, not particular to the loan. Okay, so section E are the taxes and government fees. So that's all of the recording fees, all of the doc stamps, intangible taxes that are to be paid for the mortgage. And that is all not pre-populated, but that is all pre-calculated based on the purchase price and the loan amount. So these are just numbers that we plug in, whatever the purchase price is, whatever the loan amount is, it populates these fees for us because it is set per county. Okay, so that's something that we also cannot change. Depending on the contract is who pays for these fees. The seller primarily pays for the doc stamps on the deed, as you can see, so that's on the seller side. But everything else, usually the buyer pays for the recording fees for the deed and mortgage and the taxes for the mortgage. That's paid by the buyer. Okay. Section F are the prepaids that the lender wants us to collect for. So primarily, it's going to be for the homeowner's insurance, prepaid interest, any property taxes or flood insurance that they want to collect ahead of time. And they'll determine the per diem and they'll determine how much that they're keeping in the escrow. So most likely, if it's not paid ahead of time, homeowner's insurance premium, we collect the first year at closing. So that's F1, homeowner's insurance premium, that gets paid at closing. And then the prepaid interest and the property taxes, again, those numbers are determined by the lender. So they do their own calculations depending on the loan, and they give us those numbers to plug in. Section G is the initial escrow payment at closing. Again, these are all the escrows that the lender's requiring to fund their escrow account for closing. So they also do their own calculations for this and determine how many months of each that they want to take in advance, okay? So this is just an example here. Homeowners insurance, this amount for 3 months. Then they want to also escrow for property taxes. And if there's flood insurance, they escrow for that as well. And so those are all included in section G. Sometimes you'll see something on the bottom of section G called aggregate adjustment. That's, again, something the lender provides. It's sort of like they're doing their own balancing within the escrow account. So it'll be a negative amount sometimes to offset some of the fees that they're collecting. Again, it's just for their own calculation. I don't know how it's done. They give me that number. But if there is any other questions, we ask the lender about that. Now, section H is just everything else that we couldn't find a spot for goes into section H. It's like miscellaneous fees. Okay, so we put things such as commissions, survey fees, HOA fees, any additional settlement fees, lien search fees, anything like that goes in section H. If you guys have any fees that needs to be collected from vendors or any reimbursements, they go in section H. Okay, so if you guys ever, your clients need to have a fee requested to be paid, that's where it would be in section H. Okay. As agents, this is important for you to check over when we send you guys the closing disclosures to review, for you guys to make sure that the commissions are correct. This is your last opportunity to check and make sure. If you guys have any broker fees or transaction fees that your office needs to collect, that needs to be on here as well. I know us as title companies, we try to ask for as much information as we can ahead of time. But sometimes it just doesn't always make it here. So again, it's really your responsibility to make sure that they're correct and they're collected at closing and makes it onto these settlement statements, okay? And you want to check both sides. Sometimes you don't know what the listing agent is, but if you are the listing agent, you know what the buyer's agent should be getting. So you want to check it and make sure, okay? And that is it for page 2. Okay. Page 3 on the top, it's just a comparison that they do from the loan estimate. Remember, the loan estimate is the first set of numbers that they send to the buyer to take a look at all the fees versus this final closing disclosure. And so again, this is something that they complete and they fill out. It does vary. I will say that it does vary. It shouldn't vary too much to the point where obviously if they couldn't close, we wouldn't be here, but too much so that the buyer, is surprised. And I do believe that they send numbers or send updated statements throughout the course of the closing process, or they should at least. Because the last thing you want is for your client to come to the closing table and they're in complete shock about all these fees. So, it's not good for anybody at the table. So we also, as soon as we get the final closing statements, we send them out also to all the parties, especially the buyers and the sellers, so they can take a look at it and they're not walking in surprise. Okay, and then let's see. Some of the fees that are included or some of the things that they include here. I see this one, for some reason, it says the loan estimate is 0. But sometimes they do put in the actual loan estimate fees. And they go over things such as closing costs paid before closing. They break that down. Any down payment or funds from the borrower, seller credits, and total cash to close. That is all included on that top part of page 3 of the closing disclosure. Okay, and then moving on to the middle of page 3, the summaries of transactions. Okay, this is now bringing it all together to get to the final numbers. Section K is all the amounts for the borrower. Okay, so it's all the due from borrower, including the sales price, closing costs, any payoffs, or existing loans. That's included here on section H, which is the left column. Any amounts paid by borrower before closing, such as the loan amount, that's included here, you'll see in section L. Any deposits that they've already put down their EMD, that's included here. And then any seller credits. So we also include any prorations that are to be included here for taxes or HOA fees, if they're due any credits, or if the seller is due a credit for any fees. That is done here in section K, where it says adjustments paid for seller in advance. Those are all prorations that are done. On the bottom of section L, you'll see adjustments for items unpaid by seller. That's another prorated amount. Most likely it's for taxes. As you'll see in this one, it's for taxes from January 1st to February 18th. That is a credit from the seller to the buyer for the taxes for the time that they lived in the property, since the buyer will be responsible for the taxes in November. Okay, so that is where they get their taxes for the credit on the bottom of section K. Moving on to section M, that's the seller's side of it. And then it mirrors the borrower side. It also talks about the sales price. It also calculates any of the prorations that are done. And then you'll see also on section N, any payoffs that the seller has are included in section N, and that's all taken from his bottom line. Obviously, if he's giving a credit to the buyer, that goes here also. And so then that gets all calculated and subtracted. And then all the way to the bottom, you'll see cash to close to the seller. That is where they see their net amount that they're going to be getting at closing. The bottom line on both of them is what we need from buyer and seller, or to give to buyer and seller. Okay. The next page, page 4, this is just loan disclosures. These are just things that the lender has to disclose to the buyer. Most times it's overlooked. I know we don't really go over it in closing, but things that it covers are the assumption clause, whether the loan can be transferred, any late payments, it goes over here, penalty details for the late payments, negative amortization, whether unpaid interest will increase the loan balance. So these are just further details of the loan to the buyer. Partial payments, whether the lender accepts partial payments or not, and security interest, it obviously states the lender's claim on the property as collateral for the loan. So that's all set on the left-hand side. Then it goes on the right-hand side about the escrow account, whether it's required for taxes and insurance. Again, all of this should have been reviewed with the buyer ahead of time, because this is nothing they can change at this point. We're at the closing table. It lists the total escrowed and non-escrowed property costs. And then also the initial escrow payment and estimated property costs over the year. And potential for future escrow adjustments. So the whole right side discusses their escrow account details. And then the last page of the closing disclosure, which is page 5, it has all of the contact information for all of the parties for the transaction. So it lists the lender, the mortgage broker, the real estate agents, and the title company. And it lists all of their contact information there. Then on the bottom, that's where the borrowers sign acknowledging receipt of this closing disclosure, and they date it for closing. And that is, in a nutshell, the closing disclosure.
Awesome. Does anybody have any questions with that so far? You know, for us, our main thing we always like to look for is a commission, make sure that's correct. And
Yeah.
then, you know, but definitely got to look out for a lot of things because sometimes the taxes are wrong. That's, you know, that's something that you see sometimes. The proration could be wrong. That's something to keep in mind when you definitely look at it. And that's why you should know how to do that, divided by the days, etc. But if anybody has a question, this is the perfect time. All right. All right.
All right, so as a final review and best practices, I always say, review it early, check for errors before closing day, because it's very hard for us to change these numbers once they're approved by the lender. We would have to go back to them for approval. You want to make sure that the buyer has taken a look and verified their loan terms, fees, and credits. There's no surprises. And you want to just, if they have questions, you just want to help them understand what it means and guide them. And like I said, most times that means just letting them know who the best person for them to talk to about it is, because you really don't want to get into their loan details with them. So direct them to the right people. And then confirm the lender updates for any last minute changes. Either the lender or us as title, we would know if there's any last minute changes to these, and we try to let you guys all know as soon as we can. That's that. But before I go, I'm sorry for you guys online. I don't have it on the presentation, but I did print out an ALTA statement for all of you here to take a look. I just want to briefly go over this as well. Like I said, this is ALTA statement is given in addition to the closing disclosures, because these, and we have both buyer and seller sign these at closing. This is the form that you want to give out to utility companies, insurance company, proof of closing. When people ask, this is the form, this is the settlement statement you'd want to give out, the ALTA. Okay, because you don't want to ever give out the one with all the loan information. Okay, and so as you can see for the ALTA, it has the same information. We literally just populate it from the same numbers that we did for the closing disclosure. It's just broken out differently. But if you take a quick look at it, it has the seller column on the left, the buyer column on the right, and it's really just debit and credits. And if you go through it, you'll see each section. It doesn't mirror the closing disclosure, but it does have the same sections. It starts off with the financial section with the sales price and deposits and any credits, they put that up front. Then it goes into any prorations that are done. And then it goes into the loan charges, which again should mirror the closing disclosure. Then on the second page, it lists any payoffs. And then the government reporting fees are towards the middle. So if you go through the ALTA, you will see the same numbers. You will see the headings. It will guide you to what each section is. It actually has a section labeled commissions. So you can also alternatively check your commissions on this. I would always make sure your commissions are correct on all the closing statements that are sent to you, closing disclosure and the ALTA. Make sure there's no discrepancies. Make sure they're the same. Title charges and settlement charges. Again, that's a breakdown of all of our title fees. And then we have on the ALTA, it is called miscellaneous. And those again are all the broker fees or any other fees that weren't included on the top sections. Page 3 of the Alta is the same like the closing disclosure. It has the breakdown due from buyer and due to seller. Again, they should match. And you'll see the signature page. We have both parties sign these as well. And so this would be your proof of closing. If your clients, you probably need this for your offices, but also your clients would need these for proof of closing as well. So I just wanted to make sure you guys are aware of both of these for the settlement statements. Any other questions, guys? I know it was kind of fast, but you know, anything that you guys encounter when you're with your clients or at the closing table that they ask you about? No. Okay. Well, I'm here if you have any other questions. This is our contact information at CLA Title. We can always help you explain to your clients as well if you have any questions for this. All right, guys. Well, thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much.
People that are counted by they have a tax they have to pay for different. I don't know what it is. You know what I'm talking about?
If it's like, you mean for like a foreign seller or the FIRPTA?
Yeah.
FIRPTA. Yeah.
How it works.
So FIRPTA is a foreign seller tax, and so that's 15%. There's a lot of qualifications for that. So if you know that that applies to your client, you would have to let us, the title company, know. Normally they have an attorney that helps them prepare all the documents. Sometimes there's exceptions or exemptions from the FIRPTA, depending on the price of the property, if they depend on living there for 2 years. So there's ways to get around it. But if not, then we're required to hold the 15%, which would be on the closing statement. But there's also a bunch of other documents that we would require.
So they have to hold it.
We hold the 15% off the proceeds and send it to the IRS.
Oh,
So most times we get an accountant, the seller's accountant involved, because they would know how to prepare the documents on their behalf,
okay.
or a seller's attorney. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But it's important to make sure, at least if you don't understand what it is,
Uh-huh.
at least understand that it applies so that you can start the ball rolling. At least let us know as title, and then we could always let the buyer, the seller know what's needed for the transaction.
Oh,
Okay? Okay,
thank you so much.
sure. All right.
All right, guys, I'm gonna upload this recording to our YouTube so we have it. But I think that's everything for today.